Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. And this is my channel, Have Roots Will Travel. I'm glad you came. If this is your first time, just know that I've been doing a lot of videos over the last several years about genealogy and also about les filles du roi. And I have an introductory video that you might want to look at. Fille du Roi, the version, is in the playlist, so have a look at that if this is your first time. Many of you are repeat viewers. So I want to thank you all for joining us on episode 217. Before we begin, let me show you ways you can help the channel. We can subscribe, notify, and also like the video that you're watching. And we can also, if you want to help the channel grow, we can do Patreon and Etsy, which are standalone platforms where you can contribute once or monthly, as in the case of Patreon. You can also go on my YouTube, not my YouTube, my website, Have Roots Will Travel, and I have a PayPal button there as well if you want to just donate there as well. So with that being said, let's get started and get to know our fille du roi of this episode. I also want to shout out to one of my patrons, Shelby, who very graciously has allowed me the use of her artwork. So some of this artwork that you're going to see is her, well, actually all the artwork you're going to see, I think, is all hers. So thank you, Shelby, for being just a guiding light. Thank you. Now, episode 217, Anne-Marie Vanzegue, or Vanzegue, I needed to put that word, that in case you're looking for her. Now, this is a viewer request. It's very interesting. Let's have a look at her story. After 217 episodes, I finally have someone not born in either England or France. This one is born in Hamburg, Germany. She was born in 1655. Her parents were Christian Vanzegue and Anne Catherine Fenech. Her father was a militia captain in the imperial troops, and so it is possible he was stationed there and that he was French. Possibly another Vanzegue. Seems like a Dutch name. Not sure. And so this is further study. This is not my particular ancestry, but if you have further information, love to find out why and when and how this all came about. So let's get to know her story a little bit better. So after her father's death, she somehow made her way to France and sailed aboard l'Espérance and arrived in New France on September 3rd, 1673. I just want to draw your attention. That's the last boat. She made it. Once she was there, she would actually be at La Maison Saint-Gabriel, which was founded by Marguerite Bourgeois, who founded the Congregation de Notre-Dame de Montréal. She was by far the most influential woman in Quebec and certainly Montreal's history, and she was invited to come to New France and establish a religious congregation and school by none other than Paul de Chomedy, the Sœur de Maisonneuve, the governor of the French settlement of Montreal. She established a Notre Dame congregation and helped organize the congregation and the church, and the governor allowed her to use the stable as the first schoolhouse, and this in turn became the first public school in Montreal. By 1663, she continued her work with the Filles du Roi by using the farm she had purchased on Pointe Saint-Charles to feed the poor and create a source of revenue for the church. The Filles du Roi would come here and receive instruction on their new lives, including cooking and sewing, and the sisters would oversee the selections of the husband. Marguerite would continue until her death, creating educational and religious institutions that would help the struggling town of Ville-Marie, which would eventually become the mighty Montreal. She was actually the first Canadian woman to be canonized in 1982. So this is where Anne-Marie would have come. Remember, she was an orphan. She possibly came at the invitation of the governor because of the military. I don't have that. It's just in my writer's head kind of creates that possibility. Groom that she selected and who selected her, his name, Hubert Leroux de Rousson, and he was born in 1645 in a commune called Vitry-le-François. and that is found in the grandest region of France. And inside that is the Marne département, which, as you know, the département means essentially the county. It's located on the Marne River. There's about 11,000 people who live there. The present town is a relatively recent construction, and it was built in 1545. That's recent for this place, for Europe, at the behest of King Francis, who wished to replace on a new site Vitry-en-Perthois, which in 1544 had been entirely destroyed as part of the Italian War of 1542 to 46. The new Vitry was to be a modern city constructed according to a plan produced by his architect. The king's role in the creation resulted in Vitry-le-François receiving the king's name as part of its own name, and that's why it's called that. So you can see that it's fairly recent. I mean, it's old, but not as old as some of the towns that we visited. And this is where Hubert would come from. Would come to New France. He was a bourgeois, which means like a businessman, and he came for his own interests financially and economically. Obviously, he was a man of means. The marriage would take place November 20th, 1673. So she arrived in July and September, I'm sorry, and was married by November. Pretty quick. So the family would settle in Montreal. The wonderful city that would become Montreal started off as Ville-Marie by the founder, Paul de Champmathieu, Sœur de Maisonneuve. And it was essentially a missionary center when it was established in May of 1642. The colony would not thrive, and it was on the verge of extinction when Champmathieu decided to return to France to recruit 100 settlers, which would be known as Le Grand Recrue. From this small group would evolve what we've talked about, Sister Marguerite Bourgeois, and the Notre Dame congregation, and all of the colonists that were there as of 1653. When Montreal was founded, the new colonists were rapidly confronted by a fearsome enemy, the Iroquois. There was no regular army on Montreal soil until 1665, when the Carignan-Sanière regiment landed here. But in the meantime, militias capable of resisting Iroquois attacks were set up. By 1663, Champmathieu created the Saint-Famille militia to protect Ville-Marie and its inhabitants. And obviously it was Ville-Marie, and then it would become Montréal. So they would go on to have 3 children together. Anne Charlotte would marry Claude Leblanc and had 2 children, none of whom would make it. Jean would marry Louise Chassé and had 14 children, 8 of whom would make it. Jeanne, we have no more information on. So Hubert would die very suddenly, leaving Anne a widow with 3 small children, Anne, Jean, and Jeanne, 4 more. She was living in the 1681 census with a gentleman named Jean Moreau. I do not know the connection. The second groom, his name was Gabriel Cardinal. He was born in 1661 in Montreal, Quebec. His parents were Simon Cardinal and Michel Gagne, who had arrived on the Saint-André in 1659. And so her and Gabrielle were married April 7th, 1682. Not a very long period of widowhood for her, but remember, she had 3 very small children to take care of. They had a son named Jean-Baptiste, born in 1683. No other information is known. So 1683 to 1688, they live in Montreal. Gabrielle, on Saint-Jacques Street, actually, if you're ever in Montreal, want to explore that. Gabrielle becomes an engagée West in 1688. So Anne-Marie created her own life and began her own business sometime after her marriage to Gabriel, perhaps when he was away on one of his expeditions. Her business, unfortunately, was one that caused her to have some issues with the law. It seemed that she had begun selling wine and having lots of different visitors at her home. The problem started when her son-in-law, Michel, accused her of running a house of ill repute and of using her daughter and his wife, Anne Charlotte, as a source of revenue as a prostitute. Anne Charlotte appeared to not want to live with her husband, and Anne-Marie was fiercely protective of her and refused to back down, and was extremely aggressive to Michel, to the point that a restraining order had to be applied to Anne-Marie. Elle hath no fury, like a mother. All of this brouhaha, caused her husband Gabriel to request a separation from his wife. Remember, they could not get a divorce, but they could get, in 1692, they were essentially legally separated. So Anne-Marie faces the law again. In 1693, she and her daughter were arrested for supplying wine to Indians, which was illegal, and facilitating an event that left one man dead. She and her daughter were put in prison and found guilty. Anne-Marie was fined £100, and she and Anne Charlotte were made to publicly kneel while they were berated for their behavior. More problems. In 1695, Anne-Marie was accused of adultery. They were unable to find her. She kind of fled, and so she did escape the hand of justice. Remember that she was separated from her husband, so I suspect that the charges of adultery were a bit overstated. Gabrielle would die sometime after 1694 in Lachine, and Marie would go on to live for some time. So Anne-Marie would pass away on December 4th, 1722, at the fairly respectable age of 68. At that time, 68 is kind of like 88 today. But her descendants as of 1729 were only 18. I need to know who's the descendant. I think this woman was, ahead of her time. And I think she fought and was just not wanting to obey the law and obey. She just was doing her own thing. And there's something for me as a feminist, as someone who, kind of wants women to be able to, pursue whatever they want to do. I'm actually admire the fact that she dared to do whatever she did. Obviously, she wanted to have her own identity and obviously wanted to make money, and was someone who absolutely played by her own rules. So I think that's pretty amazing. So there's some further research. Les filles du roi pionnières de Montréal by the Société d'Histoire des Filles du Roi is available. I put the link. And The Women of Ville-Marie, written by a colleague and a friend of mine, Susan McNally. Amazing book. You got to read it. It's really going to tell you not only about Montreal, but about what the Filles du Roi and les Filles Marie dealt with during that time. So have a look at that. It's available on Ancestry. Not on Ancestry, I'm sorry, Amazon. So here are my resources that I always like to point out. I've listed all the links. Today I want to focus on Généalogie Québec. Yes, it is a paying website. But if you're really knee-deep in genealogy, I would absolutely recommend you to at least get a monthly subscription. I have a yearly one, or I'm going to switch to a yearly one, actually. My use of this site is daily. And I use it for several projects, not just for Les Filles du Roi, but also when I'm working on Find a Grave or different places, I want to be able to find the sources. That Généalogie Québec is amazing. I think I want to say like $15 a month. I'm not sure. It just kind of, I've been paying it for so long, I don't remember. So it just comes out. But I absolutely recommend you have a look at that. So Anne-Marie was special in so many ways. She was born in Germany. She got on the last ship to come to New France. She married a wealthy man, and I guess was part of that business community, and was continuing that, and then married a younger man, slightly younger, and would eventually have to fend for herself. And she didn't play by the rules. And there's something very dynamic and special about this woman. I would be so amazed to know the 18 descendants as of 1729, how they grew, if they grew. So let me know in the comments below if you have a connection to this amazing woman. So thank you to all of you for joining me. And I want to thank my patrons and supporters for their loyalty and their dedication and all of the positive vibes they give me, as well as contributing to the channel's success. So thank you, all of you, as well, all of my subscribers. I think I'm going to reach 1,400 soon. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will see you on episode 218 very shortly. Until then, au revoir.